talk about something fun. Let's talk about what excites you about cloud security. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you continue to do it?
Well, that's a good question. So, cloud is still evolving, but for the most part, we're getting the value that we're expecting out of cloud,
Yep.
right? It is removing a lot of the toil that we used to have to deal with, and I do believe that businesses are able to move more quickly in the cloud, right? The other thing that I like about cloud security is that it's a lot harder, not impossible, but harder to hide things, right? You don't have the situation where something's sitting in a closet and you didn't know it was running, right? So with a little bit of discipline, we can have good coverage of all the things that we're dealing with. And I can get a comprehensive set of logs, for example, right?
Yep.
And I know what's happening in my environment. So that gives me a lot more confidence than I used to have. Yeah. How about you?
I would say it's a lot of the same things. I think it's trying to balance what we know about security, because a lot of the same domains are just carrying over, like we said before, but it's trying to solve for how those domains transition into the cloud. I think that evolution has been such a unique experience. And like you said, removing a lot of the humdrum, the manual stuff that used to take place, and seeing the level of automation that's come in and changed the direction of cloud security. And I also think that particularly for the job at ScaleSec, I enjoy the clients a lot. And there's no two clients who are alike. And the fact that the cloud presents this opportunity where no two clouds are the same and no two use cases are the same. Every organization I go into is trying to use the cloud in a different way, but we're still taking value. We're still bringing value out of the cloud. And so I think that's something that drives me. It's never the same thing twice. And when it is the same thing twice, it's always just enough of a variation so it's exciting all over again.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say more than ever, I feel that we are helping customers achieve something that they want to do,
Yep.
right? Unlock new customers for them, right? Or just accomplish a business goal that they had that they didn't know how to do because they were stuck on security issues, right?
Yes.
And so more and more, I feel like I'm on the team that's moving and
Right.
not somebody holding them back.
Absolutely.
And I do really love that. That's one of the other things that's nice about the cloud purchasing model is that I don't have to wait months to
Yes.
get something. I can try something out more quickly, figure out if it works, what are the advantages. And so the cloud's just helping us move a lot faster in doing that securely.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And the cloud itself, it's been around for, let's call it 15 years, as we call it, the cloud, removing the on-prem virtualization, all of that stuff that happened before. But as we know, the public cloud today, it's still in its infancy. We haven't even seen what it's capable of yet, in my opinion. And getting to be on the cusp of that and getting to drive that for our clients, it's quite unique. And I can't imagine myself doing anything else in tech. Coming from a development and engineering background into cybersecurity over the last 15 years, it's been amazing.
Yeah, I agree. It does still feel like it's in its infancy, right? And we see evidence of that in that there's a number of organizations that attempt to improve the development experience on top of them, right? Showing that there's opportunities for improvement, but at the same time, it's delivering value now, right? I will say I don't envy them because I wouldn't I wouldn't want to be directly competing with a cloud provider that can release a new service and put you out of business so quickly. But there's opportunities. So
Absolutely.
It's good to have that healthy competition.
Definitely, 100%. So what's the biggest challenge you faced during your time in cloud security?
I think some of the challenges we have is we advocate for things that we say are the best way to do things, but we don't always have clear instructions on how to achieve that, right? Or it's just harder than it sounds. So I'll give an example of infrastructure as code. Everybody for a long time has been saying you have to do infrastructure as code, but new cloud engineers have a hard time jumping into that, right? Where they've already started building something. And so we are seeing improvements, right? Like improvements in tools from cloud providers to import stuff into infrastructure as code to help achieve that, or also bridging the gap between kind of visual development and code development, right? So we're seeing some things that are helping you do drag and drop, but it also produces code, stuff like that. But for a long time, we have promised that a source code control based development, methodology is the way to go, and we haven't really built the tool chain to do that as seamlessly as possible.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's one thing. How about you?
I would say that mine is along the same lines. It's very much, I think when we came into cloud, we took this, you need to raise cattle, not pets approach to cloud. And we started preaching that, not having those long lasting instances and getting the cost optimization as well as the security optimization out of your cloud. And I think it's taken a long time to get to the point where we have that Kubernetes figured out kind of thing, right? Where it's just, it's a real automated experience and there's nothing long lasting and things are actually doing what we wanted to do to begin with. That was a real challenge when I first started out in cloud. And I think now one of the things that we're having a challenge with is exactly what we spoke of earlier, and that is how do we take these existing security frameworks or these existing security policies within these organizations and make them adapt to cloud when there is a clear difference between developers and architects. The architects within organizations tend to be less flexible with redefining policies and aligning that to cloud, where developers want to just move very quickly. Yeah, no. How do you view the cloud operating model, and what is your take on the importance of the cloud operating model?
Sure. Yeah. So, especially when it comes to security, I think it's important that we define roles and responsibilities. But that's not just security, right? That's like everybody. And we need to think through the implications of like what are those roles and responsibilities? Where do we divide those lines? And what things do we centralize? What things do we not centralize, right? So we're seeing, platform engineering as a broad discipline is here, and it looks like it's here to stay. So that provides this central team that's building capabilities for other teams. And similarly, I don't think we're going to get rid of the central security team altogether. But I think it's becoming more and more important that central security team does have central visibility into what's going on, but not overall responsibility for fixing everything in that environment. It's just too much for them, right? So the security team needs to be working with platform engineering teams to build the capability to identify their risks, right? Like really prioritize them and not just overwhelm teams with low priority alerts, but push to them the things that they can be doing better, right? And put the responsibility back on them, right? Like this needs to be fixed, but this is a real issue and I can help you do that. And that will, I think, balance the centralization, decentralization part of it. But there's variations of this model and organizations need to pick what's right for them, right? And that's one of the things that we're doing is helping people explore how that fits their environment and their requirements and helping them, identify a model that works in their situation.
Agreed. I think one of the things that cloud really did, in my opinion, was it exposed how deep these silos were within many organizations, right? Like there wasn't a lot of talk between the network team and maybe the individuals who are writing the code. And now you have this all-in-one delivery that comes with cloud. You stand everything up as code. So your network team needs to be involved with your development team and your security team and your ops team. They all need to be sitting at the table and understanding where things are going. So I think the cloud operating model, regardless of the way you go, regardless of how it applies to your organization, I think it's a valuable tool.
Yeah, I think the network provides a really good illustration of this model. So you can choose to allow a team to manage their own subnet, for example, right? And say, you get this CIDR block, but like you have to manage within this. Or you can have a central team, right? Share them a subnet from some centrally managed thing, and put that responsibility back, back on them. And so that's one of the key decision points. I'm not saying there's one right way or wrong
Definitely.
way, but if you don't decide deliberately, like, then you have made a decision to leave ambiguity in how you manage your network, and that will bite you later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's not documented and if it's not enforced, then it doesn't exist in most organizations. And people find a way. That's what I always tell people. If you don't say, no, you can't have access to this API, and put a blocker on that API, people are going to find a way to enable that API and use it.
Well, and that's one of the first things that I try to do is set up guardrails that say, you can't create a new internet gateway, right? You can't create a new VPC because I've already managed these. But if I do that without giving somebody a clear way of getting their traffic out to the internet, I am the bad guy in that situation,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
And so I need to do both. I need to control it, but also give somebody a clear, workable path. And by doing that, I've taken the onus off of them, right? I've made their life easier and not harder, and secured it at the same time.
Absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of the cloud operating model, right? Is that you can remove security as a stumbling block or as a roadblock and say, this is the path. And put that kind of in a central location where everybody knows what's expected and where things operate from and what controls are going to be implemented.
Yeah. How do you balance what controls you mandate and which things you maybe just recommend, or what things you just leave up to choice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it is dependent on the type of environment. I am a little bit old school. My developer comes out in the sense that I don't like to have really locked down dev environments.
Yeah.
I think it's important I think dirty environments are important. And that is because regardless of what any provider or any developer tells you about a service, you don't actually know its capabilities or its potential until you've actually deployed it in a way that's aligned to a business strategy that's within your organization. And so I think from a dev perspective, I'm a fan of having very limited controls. Of course, separate that from everything else because you don't want anybody, hacking into your prod. But I think, when you think about cloud, there's a couple things to consider. Number one is the constant change of the services themselves. That's coming from the cloud provider. The APIs change, the access level change, the underlying services that supply SaaS changes. And so you have to be I wouldn't say very stringent, but you have to have a dedicated set of controls that says, we've done our homework, we've run the POCs, we have the data, and we're certain that these are the controls that make the most sense for our organization.
So as consultants, one of our main goals is to be trusted advisors, right? And I'm curious to hear your perspective on how you work with a new customer and build that trust and help them achieve their goals and not just bring like generic advice, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's your process?
Definitely. I think number one is to know what you're talking about. And to do your homework, right? Before you go into any organization, you need to understand what their track record is, what they're trying to achieve, what their business is. Put together a list of what you could picture as being limiting factors. If they're in the financial services industry, they're heavily regulated. So how does that play into what they're trying to achieve, or how is that a blocker for what they're trying to achieve? And what are your experiences for how you have done that? And I think you can't beat experience, right? And we all have experience. It's just being able to draw on the right experience. And I think as executives go, they're juggling a million balls at the same time. And so you have to be able to insert yourself as the heaviest ball in the group so that they feel exactly what they need to feel. And taking the advice that they need based on their business history, their business strategy, and actually outlining what value you bring and bringing your experience and why your experience is relevant to what they're trying to achieve. And then being able to show, hey, I can actually pull metrics from this and prove to you how valuable this was as we move forward and after the project is complete. I think metrics are important, and I think experience carries the day. And you have to find the right chain also to get access to that executive, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You brought up metrics. That varies depending on the domain, right? And one of the things that I set out to do is understand my stakeholder, like how are they going to judge this solution as a success or not, right? How are they individually going to be evaluated within their organization, right? Because that's important, right? As technologists, we often jump straight to a solution. We're like, I understand this. Like if you just click, do this and write this code, but if it doesn't address the actual pain points they're having, then was it really a success?
Exactly. And there's also the caveat there that the pain points that have been identified sometimes are not the pain points that they're actually having. And so you need to work with their team to understand exactly what their blockers are and then be able to make suggestions for what the actual pain points are and lead them to the conclusion that those are the pain points. And I think metrics for me are valuable, and I think ScaleSec in our assessments, we make sure that we carry forward all of those metrics. We tell them exactly what their exposure is. We tell them the likelihood that those things will be breached. And I think that really brings value that many other organizations miss when they talk about taking cloud security to executives.
Yeah, I like what you said about gathering the different perspectives, because we might be brought in by one particular stakeholder, but obviously there's many, right? And so being able to get a diverse set of opinions without having to deal with the politics of being an employee in their organization is one of the biggest strengths that we can bring, and bring an independent perspective. Exactly. Because a lot of times what we say, people are like, well, yeah, we already knew that, right? But we didn't put it all together into a cohesive story and build a cohesive vision of how things can be better. And one of my favorite parts of doing an assessment like that is coming out with a plan that we all agree on, is this is where we're going to go forward from, right? Yep. Because oftentimes people have spent months or years fighting back and forth with differing visions, right? And so having one cohesive vision is critical to improving your program.
Absolutely. And cover your ears, bosses. But if I can't bring value to an organization, if I can't do that, then I make it clear to the organization that I'm not just there to sell something.
Yeah.
If they haven't made enough inroads so they're ready to proceed with us to a point where it'll bring value, you don't.
Yeah.
And that builds trust. Being able to say, I don't think I can help you, will bring them back to the table in a year or 2 years when they're ready to move.
Yeah. It would be incredibly short-sighted to try to sell somebody something that they wouldn't really benefit from.
Exactly.
Right? They're not going to come back to you. They're going to tell their colleagues, right? And that would be the end of our business.
Exactly. And we're open with a lot of our advice. We write blogs, we write white papers, we have videos like this. We distribute things openly so people can see our expertise and they can judge for themselves the value that we know ScaleSec brings to the table.